Ricardo Villalobos is a German electronic music performer and DJ of Chilean origin. Wikipedia says his career started in 1993, but his first album was released 10 years later in 2003. His most recent, which was the sixth album, was released in 2017. Hi, my name's Dan, and this is a review of the album How do you pronounce this? Alcachofa, maybe. Please correct me. Leave me a comment telling me how I should pronounce that. By Ricardo Villalobos. It was his first studio album, and it was released in 2003. And this is my first time listening to it. So I have seen descriptions of this genre holding that describes it as microhouse and minimal techno, and I can get behind uh, those. These are genres that I have reviewed bits of before, or albums that have been genre hold these things before, and I've not been a huge fan of. Um, but yeah, wait and see how I felt about this album. So um, it's long, slowly evolving electronic dance music tracks. It's instrumental apart from vocoder work. I think there's no other vocals. There might be little bits that I've missed in here. It's kind of sparse. There's lots of clipped percussion programming, so kind of complex, spiky percussion, and then there's extra noises and bits of tonal things. There's even notes at times. There is one track that has some sampled guitar, which makes it stand out from the others. So I would say that this is to EDM, electronic dance music, as dub is to reggae. Um, and possibly it has a similar intent, which is that it's intended as backing for other things to be done over. Um, at times it breaks down even further because the kind of pulse of it is the bass drum click, and at times it removes that and just implies it by the shape of the other stuff. So it's kind of pulled down the boom, boom, boom of it. Um, the tracks mostly run into each other and mostly were at a very similar speed between them. So what I do in my process is that I do my first listen. I do two listens. My first listen I do deliberately without reading anything about the act or about the album, so that I get a completely blind listen as I can. That depends on if I know anything about the act or the album beforehand, of course. And then I do my reading up, and then I do my second listen, so I have a informed listen. And when I was doing, I usually mention this when I'm with something relevant to talk about. And in this case, when I was reading the stuff about this, one of the critics said it has infinite subtlety and elegance. And at the point of reading it, I thought, really? Is that something that you could say? So I kept this in mind as I did the second listen, and I think I understand what was meant here. I'm not sure I would say necessarily infinite, but definitely there's subtlety going on here. So there's all sorts of theories that I have in terms of music and stuff. One of them is the thing that I call the ABBA principle, because ABBA exemplified this, which is to always have something that you can listen to. So that you always know when you're producing music what bit of that is the focus for the listener at that point, and to not confuse the listener by having more than one going on at once, but make sure there's always something there that's the focus. Um, and uh, then there's another thing in music which is so that is a thing that I think that applies particularly well in pop. There's also minimalism. So minimalism isn't about having nothing there, but it's about making the changes that you've got slow. So it makes small changes over time. This somehow is somewhere between the two. There's always something that's varying, but it's usually in little variations. And somehow the nature of that makes it listenable rather than dull or even over repetitive. Now, I think this is what was meant by the reviewer who said subtlety, and I can kind of go with elegance as well. So it feels like he knows. Has not the reviewer Ricardo knows how to get these little variances every time we're looping around a loop, so that the brain doesn't reject it as being the same. And I know one thing that the brain does is if you have something that repeats, that then becomes a feeling of that's an accepted thing. We can just put it aside, and then you have something else that happens. And so music often works on that. The repetitive stuff just kind of goes on in the background whilst other things are happening. Sometimes when things are just repetitive and there's nothing changing, that can be irritating, or I find it so. But I think that this doesn't because it has those little bits that are enough for the brain to latch onto. So yeah, subtlety is definitely a word to what's going on here. It is still minimal. It is still kind of background music. It's probably, I would say, not great for average club dancing. I'm not a club dancer. I've only ever once been to a club in my life, so I can only conjecture. But maybe for specialist dancing situations, but also possibly possibly intended. I don't know, but potentially it's really good for having as a bedrock, put other things over the top, and to build up as a good DJ might. Um, Also, I would say for me, it's not bad for working. I like music like this for working, especially I do some programming at times, and having some kind of minimal music in the background can be good. It can help concentration or driving. And I think it makes quite a strong background album generally. So I liked it. I was a little bit surprised by that because, as I said before, I haven't responded well to minimal techno or microhouse or things in this area. But this one, it hit it for me enough that it's getting a decent mark. I would potentially come back to this out of all the stuff in this area that I've come across. It's I've had the best response to it, I think. So that's what I think of this album. As always, I'd love to know what you think of the album. So please will you let me know that by leaving me a comment. But that's it from me for now.